Hi, my name is Yulani Elliott, and this is my ethnic identity project. So when it comes to my ethnicity, I identify as multiracial, and let me explain why. So in January, my parents bought me the DNA kit thing where you can swipe your DNA and then they test in the lab and they tell you exactly where and stuff. So I did that, and these are my results. So as you can see, that the largest portion of my DNA is Mesoamerican and Andean. I have a lot of African descent, like Nigerian, Sierra Leone. You can see at the bottom, North Africa, Central Africa. I have some European, I have some Irish, some Italian. And to have a better understanding of how this is my ethnic background, I interviewed both of my parents. And once you see their interviews, it's gonna make a lot of sense. So after their interviews, I'm gonna discuss this a bit more.
Well, our ancestry is so mixed, and to be honest, we look at ourselves as more American than anything because we don't put our pride into saying that we're black or Mexican or white or anything. We put our pride in saying we're American. And being American, we built this country. Being the black people that built it or the Mexican people that built it, that's what we have. We've been here hundreds of years. You have a grandfather that's been a Californio that was born here. When California was part of Mexico, he was already here. Your family was already here. Nana had a grandmother from Jalisco, Mexico, and her grandfather was from France, Francois Duprat, that came over in World War I, and they made Pauline your great-grandmother. So your great-great-grandparents came over. They came over, settled in San Diego, and when they settled in San Diego, your grandmother was born there and migrated up to Los Angeles in the 60s during the revolutionary times. Fraternal side, they were actually great-grandparents were second-generation slaves. They came out from Louisiana, New Orleans as they call it, and that was John Elliott was an octoroon, and he was white skinned, but he had black in him, and he had a child named Lenny, and with them they came to Louisiana, lived there, and then from there they emigrated to Los Angeles because of the opportunity that was afforded people that was not the segregation of the Jim Crow South back in the 30s and 40s. So they came to Los Angeles, California. Yes, ma'am. But as they found out in Los Angeles, there was a lot of racial tension and issues, and in certain places they couldn't go. My parents was Jack Albert Elliott from Watts out of New Orleans and Gloria Barrios from Tortilla Flats, San Diego. Boom. And they met in Los Angeles in the 60s. And they were great people that did a lot of social justice. Yeah, she was part of the Brown Berets that were part of the Black Panthers, and they did a lot of stuff to try to uplift the culture and the stuff that was kind of, because it wasn't just black people that were, looked at as second-class citizens. It was also Mexicans, Filipinos, Chinese. There was a lot of people that didn't get their rights. So that was some of the stuff they were fighting for. And your grandfather, Jack Elliott, he was part of the Black Panthers coalition, Los Angeles.
Hi, my name is April of Venegas. I am Lonnie's mother. My great-grandparents on my mother's side. Okay, so that would be my grandmother, Forrestine Buckley, and my grandfather, Otis Neal. Otis Neal was actually my mother's stepfather. My mother's real father is a little bit of a mystery. My grandmother was from the South. She lived in Alexandria, Texas, and back then it was really hard. She's African American, by the way. and it was really hard on African Americans in general in the South. And in Texas, women get taken advantage of, especially African American women, and it's something that people don't really talk about. And a lot of the time they end up having children out of wedlock who are not claimed by either the white father or the multiracial father. I mean, it's a bit of a subject that kind of just gets overlooked. But my mother's father was, I guess you would say, Creole. He did have white in him, and I actually did a DNA test recently. So when I did my DNA, it said that I had 15% European blood, so that made sense. So my mother would be African American with a dash of course, Creole. My grandmother said in Texas, she hated the way that Black people were treated, that at those times you could save up your money and had an option to take the train. And back then, when you took the train, if you lived in Texas, the train would drop you off in California, and that's where you would start. She got on the train and ended up in California, and so that's how she made her migration over to California from the South. Okay, well, my father, obviously Venegas, is that my father, Arthur Venegas, when he came out of the Navy as an electrician, he worked for the Department of Water and Power, and he had an unfortunate accident where he lost his life on the job, but he did save another man. My father got electrocuted and spent weeks in the hospital dying. So there's actually a plaque in Los Angeles, the Department of Water and Power, very tiny plaque, but it has his name on there because there was another gentleman that was in the lift who he pushed out and saved. My grandparents on my dad's side, right? That would be my grandmother, Julia Venegas, and then my grandfather, Jose Venegas. They're from Central America, pre-Columbia, and then they migrated up to Veracruz in Mexico, but they are Latin, and from there they came up to California. My grandfather was actually in the Army, and then he met my grandmother, and they basically migrated to California legally.
So I can relate to both what my parents identify as, but I think with me, the distinction is that, yeah, I do say I'm multiracial, but if someone questions me, like, oh, are you Black or this? Yeah, and I'm proud to be. Yeah, I'm a Black woman. Yes, I'm a Latino woman. But one challenging thing about that is that there are going to be certain communities that feel that I'm too fair-skinned to say I'm this, or I don't speak Spanish, so how can I say I'm Latin? I've dealt with that a lot, so I do kind of see that pushback. But for me, people in my family have these identities, and they're important to me, and I'm a part of them. So that's why I advocate for these communities, and I claim these identities. In class, we had a reading called All Mixed Up. What do you call people of multiple backgrounds? And I remember in the article, Jenny Fan was talking about how she was at the mall with her mom, and the cashier made the comment about her to her mother saying, "They're mixed, I can tell by their hair." And she would talk about how she would often get questions, what are you, what are you, what are you? And I definitely have that same experience. When someone asks me that, I feel like they're trying to categorize me in a box, and they're trying to stereotype me, And when it comes to being multiracial, in certain communities, it can be challenging because there is anti-Blackness that still exists, even in Latin communities, not just white communities. So, there has been incidents where I've been called mulatto, and some people didn't even want to socially interact with me because, they see my hair and they have these stereotypes and assumptions. And that type of behavior just reminds me of the movie we watched in class called Ethnic Notions. It talks about how there was dehumanizing characters of Black bodies, African Americans, how they were depicted was as less than, as dumb, as inferior. So I think a lot of people still have that mindset. And when it comes to someone mixed or someone of a multiracial background, I feel that they want to categorize you, but they can't. So that makes them uncomfortable. So they try to go with physical features on you to categorize you in certain racial groups, so they then can stereotype you. Okay, so after my parents' interviews, the Mesoamerican Andean part, that large portion, I concluded comes from my mom's side, her grandparents, since they migrated from Central America to Mexico and then from Mexico to California. The European side is on both my mom and dad's side. My dad talked about having an Irish grandfather, and so that's where that Irish and Scottish comes from. The African is on both sides, which is really cool. I wish I could pinpoint exactly where. Like, I wish I could be like, this part's Nigerian and this part's here from which side of my family. But unfortunately, because of slavery and all of that other kind of displacement, I'm not able to do that.